So what is the social contract? The social contract is, in very broad terms, the tacit agreement between citizens and the society they live in. And it's this unwritten contract on the basis of which people comply by certain norms, they abide by these rules, and they get in exchange things that they consider to be very important. I would argue that it has three fundamental components. One has to do with safety and physical safety in particular from external aggression and others. The second component, I would argue, has to do with the economics of that contract. People work, study, and they do better in life, they progress in life, they have economic opportunity. And the third component, I would say, is very political in nature, which is people abide by these rules, but they get to vote, and they get to be represented, and they get to change the reality around them through that political exercise. Now, is this contract broken? And I would argue that yes, if it's not outright broken, it is in the process of being eroded through various forces. And I would say that the three areas are in fact under severe pressure. So in terms of physical safety and security, I would argue the rise of terrorism and what it manifests, the porous nature of our borders and our security, and how people have to sometimes suffer the consequences of terrorist action directly in their cities and in their neighborhoods. It's in fact leading to an erosion of this notion of security. I would also say the rise of cyberspace and of cybercrime is another manifestation of the erosion of that part of the contract, because again, it just opens our privacy, our property and intellectual property to crime from external actors. Now, I would also say that the second component, the economic one, seems to be under severe stress. And this is true because of the changing landscape of work. This is true because of the erosion of economic intergenerational mobility in most of the developed world. It is also true because of stagnation of income of the middle class, and this we've seen abundant evidence of this in the US alone. There are over 70% of households that saw no real market income over the last 30 years. So again, that fundamental piece of the contract that basically states you're going to do better in life, you can work and you will get opportunities, seems to be eroding for many people within developed economies. And the third piece, that of political representation, also seems to be eroding because of the effects of globalization and power diffusion, both downwards from the state into corporations and NGOs, and upwards from the states and national governments into multinational organizations and regional organizations like the EU, the UN, and others. So citizens have this feeling that in fact they can still vote, they can elect political leaders, but those leaders don't have the capacity to deal with the most pressing problems that their citizens feel. For example, climate change, or migration, or regulating big tech. These topics overwhelm national boundaries and hence national governments as well. So how can we fix this? Is there a solution to these problems? Should we work hard to find a solution to these problems? I would argue that yes, because the rise of populism and the political fracture that we're living in the world, I think, is a direct consequence of this erosion and fracture of the contract. And the solutions are manifold. They're complex, but they're out there and we can work towards them. On the security front, it clearly has something to do with regulating cyberspace information and access to cyberspace much better, also controlling our borders and finding the right policy towards immigration and others, I think, will be fundamental features of that. In the economic space, tailoring and designing an education for the future work will be a fundamental feature of that new contract, and people will feel that they have greater economic opportunity once the right training and education is there for them and for their children. The taxation system will have to be tweaked, and it will have to be recalibrated, and we will have to put tax pressure, particularly on corporations that have high incomes and high revenue, particularly the tech companies and others. On the role of the private sector, part of the answer lies, which is, this expansion of the notion of business sustainability will have to occur, and a private sector that is much more committed to the 2030 agenda and the SDGs, I think, will be a fundamental feature of this. And on the political piece of the contract, I would argue that in improving the governance in places like the EU, like the UN and others, and their democratic accountability will go a long way in terms of forwarding the legitimacy of the order and in reconstructing that contract. I think this is urgent. This is an important task that we have ahead of us, and something that will occupy political science and governments for quite a while moving forward. It's very important that we get this right, but I am certain that we will. Thank you.